Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to LRM Ranks. Today we are going to be ranking everybody's, well, hopefully everybody's favorite, Star Wars. That's right, all 10 live-action Star Wars films, including the Lucas films and Disney's films. I am joined by the esteemed editor-in-chief of LRMonline.com, Joseph Jammer Medina.
Hey, glad to be here. And I know you can't see this right now, but I first would like to apologize. My backdrop, my room isn't completely done yet. I like to say that I've just moved in here, but that's a lie. I've been here for about 2 months, and I just haven't put up all of my shit. So you can't see this, but I got my classic Star Wars poster in the background, a bunch of my pop figures and books and stuff, along with my storyboarding little bulletin board there. So that's all behind me. You can't see it, and I'm realizing now how stupid it is to have it arranged. I have this open area right here where I have like my comic posters, but those aren't even up yet because of reasons. So sorry it doesn't look nicer. Next time, I definitely hope that'll be the case.
That's right. I've got the same background that I've always got. I got my Kingdom Hearts Keyblade sitting behind me, a bunch of little Marvel figures on a shelf.
But that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
You can't see my stuff. You can see your stuff.
I can see my stuff. I'll see your stuff when I start editing, so it'll be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I've got one little Star Wars thing right here in the corner, but I can't get it in shot, otherwise it'd be too far back, and anyways. So Star Wars. Everybody's probably been waiting on this one. We've ranked the MCU, we've ranked some Batman, we've ranked Spider-Man movies, and here we are, finally, the big kahuna, if you will, Star Wars. What does Star Wars mean to you, Joseph?
Star Wars was probably the first film franchise I was ever truly interested in as a kid. I'm trying to think back when. I mean, I remember growing up watching these on VHS, and then when the special edition stuff came around, getting released, I was like 10 or so. And like me and a couple of friends were obsessed with it to the point where we were called like the Star Wars buddies the entire time. It was really embarrassing, and it continues to be embarrassing that's how it all started. But I loved these movies. These movies really, especially the original trilogy, I should say specifically, they really helped shape my interest in storytelling overall and fantasy storytelling. I'm also I write novels as well, and I remember as a kid wanting to make a trilogy of Han Solo books as well, and I never got around to writing the stories, but I remember thinking of like, oh, they're going to be great. There's going to be one where Chewie gets kidnapped. There's going to be one where like Han Solo does basically a Solo a Star Wars story type story, except worse. So we'll talk about Solo later. But yeah, it was one of my first inspirations to actually go out and create something. And it was the first movie where it's like, oh, you could actually create these big worlds, these big fantastical worlds for people to take advantage of. And I adored it. I was also one of those kids who watched those Leonard Maltin interviews with, I think it was George Lucas, back on the VHSs. Even before I even had any interest in filmmaking or anything, for some reason, I watched those things on repeat, and then I watched the special edition, special features at the front of the VHS on repeat as well. So yeah, my first film love was definitely Star Wars. I'm sure as many other people, but yeah, as I've gotten older, and my interest had sort of expanded outward, I don't want to say I've fallen out of love with them, but I do think that unlike a lot of Star Wars fans, I'm able to look back on them with a little less nostalgia goggles. I've watched them so much to the point where I think I almost got sick of them to the point where I disliked them for a while. Wow. And that's not, I mean, I probably watched them like 100 times. I'm sure many people have watched them all 100 times. But I think, unlike a lot of people, I have this ability to, after a while, be like, okay, well, that was fun. And then be able to come back and look at it with a fresh eye and appreciate the weaknesses or the strengths by itself, separate from my nostalgia. But yeah, It means a lot to me for sure.
Definitely. I've got Star Wars permanently etched on my skin. I'm showing off my my geek tattoo here. It's definitely near and dear, close to my heart. I can remember a time when I was real little wearing out VHS tapes because I would watch them and set the VCR on repeat. And that would be on like in the middle of the night, kind of almost like a security blanket when I was real little, like late elementary school.
Did you have a TV in your room?
I did.
Oh, you lucky bastard. I never got a TV in my room. I was so jealous of my cousin. You know what he also had? All the rich kids, they had those automatic rewinders. You know, the ones that you push them down. I'm not sure if it was a rich kid thing. I know I didn't get it. That's the thing. I wanted one because you could actually watch something and rewind separately at the same time. Fucking luxury.
Yeah, I had one of the VCRs where you could set it to repeat, so it would rewind after the movie completed. It'd rewind itself and then start playing again. That's what I had. At one point, I had a set of bunk beds because me and my sister used to have to share a room a long, long time ago. And when we moved and she got her own room, I had my own room. I kind of put blankets and these what people would call a yoga mat today. My dad was in the army. I called him a PT mat. And I put these around the bottom bunk bed, so I had like this cocoon, right? And there's only a little opening for me to get in and out of. And then at the foot of the bed, where the ladder was, there was another opening, and I stuck my TV right there.
See, that's called a fort.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I could sit in there and watch the movies or play on the old Super Nintendo from the comfort of my bed. And Star Wars was definitely something I absolutely loved. Like I said, it's been the genesis for friendships. You see somebody wearing a Star Wars shirt, you just go over and you've automatically got an icebreaker, something to talk about. My love affair with Star Wars in recent years has been tested. Disney is doing what Disney does, and there's been some good things and some bad things, and we'll delve into that here in a minute. But I just want to thank you for coming on, and I want to thank everybody out there that's been watching these and giving us feedback. And let's get into it. You ready?
I am so ready. Let's do this.
All right. So we've got 10 films to go through. Yes, that's right. 10 films total, 6 from George Lucas and 4 from Disney. Again, we're only doing the live action, and we're not counting those side stories with the Ewoks.
I put those on here. No, I didn't. Sorry. I watched the fuck out of those as a kid, though. I remember we used to wake up early every single morning, weekend. I would watch those, and then I would watch Saturday morning cartoons. I love those Ewok movies as a kid. But yeah, these do not. They would be at the bottom. Well, would they?
Yeah.
No, yeah, they would be.
Alrighty, so Joseph, go ahead and start us off with your number 10.
All right, my number 10. I don't think this will be a controversial choice. Number 10 is Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
Ooh.
This was easily the bottom choice for me. I mean, I could see a lot of people maybe going the Phantom Menace for this one, but the reason why Attack of the Clones is because it had a distractingly awful love story that soaked up way more time than it needed. It didn't feel believable, and it just really bored the hell out of me. I remember when the trailer first dropped, thinking to myself, "Oh my God, this is Star Wars, and I'm somehow not excited for this. What is going on?" I was very confused, and then a friend of mine who worked at a theater at the time was like, "No, it'll be good. Don't worry, it'll be good." This movie had some great some great fan service moments, had some great action, but it was all surrounded by a bunch of garbage. It had one good thing, and that one good thing was it really twisted everyone's expectations when the Clone Wars actually started, because you realize, the clones are actually, they're with us. They're with the good guys, which confused us. And I thought that was clever. I also, at the time, really liked Yoda's stuff, but in retrospect, not as much, just because of how nonsensical his fighting style is. Don't like it as all of that. I don't mind him being strong, because I know a lot of people say he's not strong. That's not what he does. I don't mind that as much as just don't like his fighting style. But yeah, it really it doesn't help when you have two non-charismatic leads reading the driest dialogue known to man and trying to have us buy into their love story that we could not buy to save our lives. So it was just a chore to watch, and at some points overly convoluted. I still don't understand why we don't know who Sifo Dyas is, or at least in the context of the film. I feel like it's the first movie I watched in the franchise where it felt like there were other stories that I should have been reading or watching, and I just never got the chance to. And it just felt incomplete as a result, and it always bothered me.
I can agree. It's definitely low on my list as well. It's not number 10. It was rough. I will say this about the Yoda thing, and everybody that's been paying attention to my Column the Cantina or any other discussions on those fanboys, I am probably the hugest EU fan there ever was, and still am to this day. Jedi were able, older Jedi and Jedi that were hurt, were able to draw on the Force to give them energy to be able to do stuff. All of the flipping, like you said, the style Yoda had was completely just, I think you said nonsensical. If not, I'm saying nonsensical. And Yeah, all the flipping and stuff wasn't necessary, but he could draw on the Force to give himself some physical strength to be able to do what he did, and he would have been very, very tired afterwards. And I think they kind of showed a little bit of that. I agree. There was story threads where you're like, did I miss something in the first movie, or did I miss something when I went into the bathroom while I was in the theater? And yeah, the love story, man. Love stories can really ruin movies. For example, I love the first Thor movie. It's not Marvel's greatest film, but
it's another Natalie Portman love story.
Exactly. She has very, very... I've never seen any of her romantic comedies, so I'm not sure if she's got chemistry with anybody on screen. But Anakin and Thor, no chemistry whatsoever, and that kind of hindered Thor. You know, J. Michael Straczynski, one of my favorite comic writers, was on that movie, and it's a good story overall, but yeah, the love story gets in the way of it. So I can definitely get that. I kind of like how they show a little bit of the darkness in Anakin, like his ability to go dark when he slaughters the Sand People that had kidnapped his mother, and the Tusken Raiders. And it's a rough movie. It really is. I mean, agree.
A lot of the stuff in theory, this is George Lucas's problem. A lot of stuff in theory, when you look at the actual contents of like what happened, is usually interesting. It's just how it's done. Like even when Anakin was, after the idea of him slaughtering them and doing that, I liked the idea of it, but it almost wasn't enough for us to buy what happened in Revenge of the Sith. Also, his whining was just not, it wasn't, it was distractingly awkward the way he said stuff.
He didn't really have much.
It's like, I mean, the women and the children.
Yeah,
like that whole monologue was hard to watch.
And overall, something in the sequel trilogy is you get a lot of people complaining about Kylo Ren being kind of like a whiny brat. Kylo, he does have some whiny moments, but he's a lot more angry, and I think he has more reasons to be angry than Anakin did. Yeah, Anakin's mom got killed. I got that tracking. That's gotta hurt. But the guy lived a dream, you know, right. Taken away from slavery at a young age, goes on these wonderful adventures, gets, you know, one of the top Jedis to be his master. I mean, he really didn't. They didn't do enough for me to make him show where he could be so clouded. Kylo, I get it. Kylo's got his mom's politics pulling him one side, his dad's swashbuckling adventurism pulling him to one side, his uncle's Jedi heritage pulling him to another side, and then the legacy of Vader pulling on him. I mean, we'll get into Kylo later. But yeah, definitely. I don't buy Anakin's whininess. I can buy Kylo's whininess. So yeah, that's definitely it. We'll have a little bit more to say on Attack of the Clones when I get there. And so let's go into my number 10, which will be The Phantom Menace. You mentioned that a lot of people put that at the very bottom. And when I was coming up with this list, I started thinking, okay, am I ranking these based on film in general, like comparing them to all films? Am I comparing them to just each other? Am I thinking of which ones am I most likely to watch again? And I kind of went with that because there are things about all these movies that if you're looking at story or cinematography or effects or certain things, you could change the order. Do you agree on that? Like if you look at some specific thing, the order definitely changes up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I approached it kind of like watchability, my favorites, what I'm most likely to watch again. And The Phantom Menace is one of those that I think you can cut out completely. Even if you want to watch, I think the phrase was machete order a long time ago before the Disney movie started. And people were saying like, you know, you could watch 4 or 5, then you go back to 2 and 3, and then you finish with 6. A lot of people just cut one out. The story was rough and choppy. There's parts where they're moving way too fast. And if you ever watch the making of special, I think it came out on the DVDs, and I think they also put it on the Blu-rays. There's a point where Lucas and God, I can't remember the producer's name right off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, I can't either. I know who you're talking about though.
Yeah, but Lucas and the producer are sitting there watching the first cut, and they're both got this look on their face like, oh God.
Oh,
what did we do? What did we do?
I think you're projecting a little bit on that one. I'm pretty confident George Lucas made the movie he wanted to make.
but the look on his face kind of, especially the producer, maybe not as much on Lucas, but there's still a moment where maybe the cut was just bad. Maybe he wasn't happy with the cut. I'm not sure, but I really like that. Have you ever seen that entire documentary, The Making
I've
of?
seen every documentary ever on the Star Wars franchise. I don't remember specifically.
Okay.
But I'm trying to think here. Sorry for the clicking. Producer, Phantom Menace, because it's really going to bother me if I don't figure out who the hell that is. Rick McCallum? I know. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's it.
I had an R in my name, but I was saying Ralph for some reason. But anyway, or a name in my head. I was thinking Ralph for some reason, not Ralph. But yeah, Rick, got it. And I can remember that, and I can agree. The Phantom Menace, I think, has a lot of editing issues. And I also think that, I mean, look, we can spend hours on Jar Jar Binks and how horrible him and the Gungans in general were. But I can remember sitting in the theater, and I saw it at a midnight preview, and I was all by myself. My dad was a drill sergeant. He, had late nights and early mornings, so he couldn't go see it with me. And it's not my mom's thing, and my sister was younger, and it's not her thing. So here I am. I think I was in 8th grade in '99. Yeah. And I'm sitting in this theater after midnight by myself watching it, and the credits roll, and I had this feeling like I enjoyed some of what I saw, but I'm not sure I enjoyed that entire movie.
Oh, I loved it at first.
I had to go back and see it again, and I ended up seeing this movie several times in theaters, partly because, lightsabers, and at the time, pod racing, I thought that was kind of cool, but I knew that the kid, Jake Lloyd, playing Anakin, I knew I couldn't stand his acting. I knew it was horrible. And I knew that the whole bait and switch with Natalie Portman, Padme versus Amidala was weird, and I didn't quite like the way that had happened. It was too convenient for me. And overall I felt the movie was just bad, but it had these great two scenes that for some reason in the back of my 13, 14-year-old mind tickled my brain enough that I had to go back and see it. And I cannot tell you the last time I watched that movie. I really can't. It's been years.
I can't tell you the last time I watched it either. I will say I did like it the first time I saw it. I saw it in theaters probably 4 or 5 times, and I definitely got it on a VHS, watched that a few more times. Wasn't until I was older that I realized how bad it was. And there are a couple...
Yeah.
Back when I was little, I also read the novelization by Terry Brooks. And I think that's another reason I really enjoyed it. I think the book is like a slightly better take on the story, but I might be completely wrong because, again, I read that around the same time. But if you look at the narrative, it is a mess. It has no lead character, almost. The Anakin doesn't come in until, like, pretty far into the movie. And they do this weird virgin birth thing. I think we've mentioned this in the past. Yep. And I don't understand what its focus is, what it's trying to tell. It has a story that has like of no real consequence to anything. And it was just confusing. Like, yeah. It just, looking back on it now, as you mentioned, the machete order cuts it out completely. And that's because, it's of no consequence other than introducing Anakin. And it does nothing for him other than say, oh, he's good at pod racing. And he is good technically and midichlorians and other things.
That word. Lucas, that was... bringing up that word. Not a lot of people like to talk about it. In the EU, I can't remember if it was in the Legacy of the Force or Fate of the Jedi books, but there's a scene where your favorite character, Jason, with your favorite
Jason.
Spelling.
Jacen. Those who don't know, Jacen. And as a kid, I read that and I was like, this name is fucking stupid. I don't want to read any more of these books. And I stopped because some part of me felt really self-conscious about it. Like, what? Mm-hmm. Why? It's so cheesy. But anyways, continue.
There's a scene where he makes fun of that. I cannot remember the specific line, but the author just took a knife and was like stabbing the idea of midichlorians. They were talking about, I think they were talking either about Ben Skywalker or maybe Jason's daughter. And somebody had said something about midichlorians, and he was like, no, that doesn't matter. None of that matters. The Force is blah, blah, blah. It was great. It was a wonderful little like, haha, screw you, midichlorians. And I remember hearing that in the movie, and even, like I said, young Kyle, just 13, 14 years old, and being like, you just ruined the Force. Now it's bacteria in somebody's blood talking to them, so they're schizophrenic, they're hearing voices. I mean, you just completely ruin this mystical force that binds us, penetrates us, binds the universe together, and you just crapped all over it. So,
and
yeah.
It didn't bother me as a kid. I wasn't intelligent enough to realize that he broke it. I wasn't intelligent enough to realize the difference between the science fantasy he created in the original trilogy and the science fiction he was making it into in the new trilogy. So yeah, it didn't really bother me at the time, but in retrospect, obviously, I completely understand why that was a thing. But I think I was just bothered a lot less by this movie, as unwatchable as it is and how little consequence it is. I do think that the pod racing was really fun to watch. And then if you are that kid's age, and it's always fun to sort of imagine yourself as a Jedi, and I definitely did as a kid as well. So I think when all said and done, I still think back more fondly on it than I ever did with Attack of the Clones. So I think that's why it's not number 10, even though I can understand why it would be number 10. And if I watched it now, it probably would be number 10. So who knows?
I remember enjoying the toys a lot, and it had like the that little communicator that the Qui-Gon and them used. It had the toys with the little plates, and it had movie lines and stuff. I remember enjoying the toys quite a bit. Even though the special edition had come out just a couple years before, I really think Episode 1 really revitalized the merchandising for Star Wars, and being young enough to still enjoy toys.
And the
N64
N64 pod racing game. Did you play that?
Yeah,
that was the shit. That was so fun.
And then, God, there was a whole bunch of those movies that came out around the prequels, like Jedi Power Battles, and there was another one. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, I remember several of those games, and Pod Racer was one of them. I can remember being at a computer show, and we're getting off a little bit, but I want to tell this. I'm a huge PC gamer over consoles, and way back in CRT monitors, being able to do like flicker stereoscopic 3D, I was at a computer show, and somebody was using the PC version of the Pod Racer game to show off 3D. And
nice.
I remember trying to beg my parents to get it for me, but I don't think we had the cash at the time, which is fine because it was a gimmick. And definitely, I don't even use 3D these days, and it's way better today than it is, back then.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, that's the Phantom Menace, and so let's go ahead and go into number 9, Joseph.
My number 9 is the Phantom Menace. So
there we go. Let's continue on.
Yeah. So am I going number 8, or do you want to go to number?
No. I mean, continue on with more of your take on it.
My take on it. I feel like I said everything I need to say about it. I enjoyed it at the time. It doesn't hold up. It never really held up. I was just a kid, and rewatching it in later years, it's so fucking long. It's meandering. The story goes all over the place. Stuff happens, and you don't really care why. And awkward acting, awkward dialogue.
You could almost use some scenes of it. Like, I've seen fan edits of the prequels, like where they take all 3 prequels and they shove them down to like 2.5 hours for 3 movies. They break it down into like 2.5 hours. And I could see parts where you could use clips from episode 1 as like a flashback or something. I mean, look, I will say this last bit from me on it. It does have, in my mind, the best lightsaber fight.
Yeah.
Out of all of them, including the new ones. And I love the Last Jedi's lightsaber battle, but there was some energy between Ewan McGregor and Ray Park that they seem to go at it. And I can remember that making of documentary again, and they're talking about how Ray and Ewan would be hitting each other's lightsabers so hard that they'd be bent at 90-degree angles by the time they yelled cut. Yeah. And so I think that really translated on screen on that. So.
I think it did too. It was, I think, maybe the last lightsaber battle where it actually seemed like the guys were shooting to kill each other, were aiming to kill each other, like actually going for vital parts of the body in order to, with the lightsabers, as opposed to Revenge of the Sith, where they're clearly not even trying to hit each other. They're just trying to make flashiness. And the one that stands out to me is that one shot where Ewan McGregor, like he's holding it, like the lightsaber in front of him and blocking a shot from front, and then like he reaches over him and like puts it behind him, and like blocks it behind him. Like it's really quick. It's like boom, 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 and it's really fast. And I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, and people who've watched the movie know exactly what I'm talking about. But that part was an especially badass move, and I think it was really effective because clearly, if his lightsaber had not been there, he would have been killed. And I think that's one thing the new trilogy or the new films have done really well is they've made lightsaber battles actually look like they're aiming to kill, which once again,
It's a fight, not a dance.
yeah, which George Lucas spun away from later on when in his own trilogy or his new prequel trilogy.
Well, since my number 10 and your number 9 were the same, that means we're on to my number 9. And this is the one that is going to upset a certain somebody on the staff. And I might receive some hate for this. But in the scheme of movies I'm least likely to watch again, Star Wars-wise, number 9 for me is Solo, a Star Wars story.
Ah, Nick
Go ahead.
Dahl. Nick
Give
Dahl,
me the hate.
Nick Dahl hates you. He hates
Give me the
you.
hate. Just give me more. You, online, give me more hate. Just feed it to me, all right? Got it. Look, again, I'm biased by the EU. I'll never deny that. I think the Han Solo character was completely ruined in this movie. They told me 2 stories I cared nothing about. You told me how he meets Chewbacca, and you told me how he won the Millennium Falcon. Both of those stories, everybody already knows. Chewie was a slave, Han freedom, and then he wins the Millennium Falcon in a Sabbath game from Lando Calrissian.
To be fair, not everybody knows, just you. A lot of people haven't read those books.
Well, there's mention about winning it fair and square from Lando in Empire Strikes Back, so you figured that he won it in some sort of game of chance, maybe a race or something like that. And so I'll say maybe they don't know about the slave Wookiee bit, but they definitely know that he at least won the Millennium Falcon from Lando Calrissian.
Sure.
There's so much more you could have told me about. You have this entire thing from the time Han Solo is born to the time he meets Luke and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And when we meet him in A New Hope, he's this swashbuckling adventurer. He's cocky. We know he's had at least one bad day when Greedo shows up and he's like, hey, look, even I get boarded sometimes. You know, he has to dump some cargo and Jabba the Hutt's after him. That would have been more interesting. The stories of him at his heyday would have been better in my mind. They could have kept some of the beginning stuff in Solo where they show him in the Imperial Navy. That is something they brought from the EU. He did join the Empire. He did free Chewbacca during his time when he got fed up with people being enslaved. But Han Solo, at least going by the OT, he was never a good guy until he notices some 17-year-old girl running a rebellion and a 17-year-old boy hopping in a fighter to go take on a Death Star. And I wholeheartedly believe that it was Luke and specifically Leia that gave him his change of heart. So to see him have this love interest and to be the good guy in Solo and do the right things for the right reasons at the right time, I felt it took away from his character going into the original trilogy. Some of the little Easter eggs from the EU, like mentioning the Maw, yeah, fine. A little bit of fan service. There was, 2 black holes? The Maw used to be like this whole group of black holes right offset of Kessel. The whole hyperfuel thing, I didn't really like that. Kessel was known as a spice mine. They even say spice mines of Kessel in the original trilogy. C3, it's one of the first lines. C3PO is like, we'll be sent to the spice mines of Kessel. And so now we're talking about hyperspace fuel in Kessel. No, don't buy it. Couldn't stand it. If you had taken that exact same movie, I will say this. If you had taken that exact same story and made it about some other character, I probably would have enjoyed it.
Yeah. I could.
But because it was Solo, nope.
I don't agree with you completely. I understand where your criticisms come from, but there are some criticisms that I do not agree with. One of them has to do with Solo ruining the character of Solo, essentially. Mm-hmm. I don't think the idea that it made his decisions matter less is completely accurate, because there's still a good decade or so before we get to see him between Solo and between A New Hope. And I do not think it's necessarily belittling for him to have been good at one point, but then at some point become jaded and preservation in nature, whatever it's called. Basically, someone who's only out for himself. I don't think there's anything wrong with having him at some point be that person. And yeah, I just don't think there's a problem with that. And I almost feel like it could potentially, obviously we're not necessarily going to get this story continued, but if he becomes that jaded person that we know him, and then A New Hope is what brings him back to that based on these people, I think that's just as powerful, or it can be just as powerful, because it could be like, I had lost all faith. I used to be good. This galaxy broke me, and now these two people brought me back to where I used to be. I'm less jaded. I'm less selfish than I used to be. I don't think there's anything wrong with him having been a good person before. And I think you mentioned it's colored by your perspective of the EU, where they have him probably more of a gray area guy rather than a pure white guy. And I think there is room for the growth to be there, but unfortunately it's not in this movie. This movie doesn't tell us the story of how Han became Han. It tells us the story of Han before Han. And it never, my biggest problem with it is it never makes an effort to tell us anything new. It just makes an effort to tell us the backstory behind things that we already know. And I don't like that. I think that's a microcosm of the big problem with these movies. That's why Rogue One, while I enjoyed the movie, was not as good as it could have been, because it was, once again, delving into things that we already know and just going deeper. And I don't want to know about those things. I want to learn new things. And Solo was just sort of like a big point of that. Like, we've learned about those dice that no one cares about. We learned about his name for some reason. We learned about
that pissed me off.
Han Solo. We learned about his relationship with Chewie. We learned about him getting the Millennium Falcon. We learned about the Kessel Run. It's like literally a checklist. Someone was there with the checklist saying, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this. And it reminds me of when I was during Los Fanboys a few years back, when my co-host at the time was like, oh, well, we need to find out how he gets the Millennium Falcon. And I remember saying, I don't give a shit about the Millennium Falcon. I do not care. I just want a great story that expands this universe and makes it the big, sprawling epic that I think it is, rather than things that's just shrinking the galaxy down to the size of like a small city where everything is connected. So just a microcosm. It's higher on my list. We'll get to it when the time comes. But I do think it has some good things. I agree with you. It would have been better if it wasn't a solo story. That being said, it's still kind of forgettable. It's still a fun adventure. Oh, yeah. But it's kind of forgettable. It's nothing super special, but it is a lot of fun. But it's inherently less fun if you're really attached to the character of Han Solo.
Yeah. Like I said, definitely. I could see that story being done in a different universe and me actually enjoying it. I actually really did like the whole ground battle scene where he first meets Beckett. I thought that visually, as a war movie, I was kind of hoping for more of that in Rogue One. But let's go ahead and continue on to your number 8.
So my number 8, wait, 9, 10, 9, 8. Yeah, 8 is none other than Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now, this was the culmination of 6 movies, the culmination of the Darth Vader storyline, aka the Anakin Skywalker storyline. And while it was admirable in what it tried to do, I think George Lucas was ultimately too obsessed with bridging the gaps between the movies that it kind of ended up being a heartless, shallow shell of what it should have been. I felt no emotion connected to Anakin, which I should have. None to Padme, which I should have. And it just didn't feel like a natural... This sounds really judgy, but in the wrong ways possible. And what I mean by that, I felt like the thing that I imagined leading up to Darth Vader turning wasn't at all what this ended up being. It wasn't nearly as dark, emotional, or effective. And it almost felt like he just knew, I have to get here. And it doesn't really matter how believable it is as long as I end up there. This is another textbook case of George Lucas, in theory, things being cool, the story being cool, but just the execution just not being that great. And it just... I'm trying to think of the things that I just did not like. It was too long. It was very long. It didn't cater the story of Anakin very well. It didn't give him a believable enough reason to turn. Well, I guess the reasoning was enough, but just the way it was done didn't work. The acting, once again, very stiff, very choppy. And just the way it all turned out, I just didn't buy it overall. Yeah. It had some good moments, for sure. Like the Mustafar battle. it looked cool and it was great at the time. And Ewan McGregor is acting up a storm with that terrible dialogue. But at the end of the day, it just was still lacking heft. Execute Order 66, the idea of it was good, and the way it swelled with the music was good. John Williams did a great score. However, am I the only one who thinks that that was it blue or green girl who gets shot in Execute Order 66? The way she falls, it looks so awkward.
The Twi'lek with
sure.
the two brain tails.
Yeah, that just it looked so awkward the way she fell, and it looked goofy. Like inadvertently goofy.
I'm wondering if that they were like, okay, so right here is a plant, so when you fall, make sure you don't hit this invisible plant that you can't see, because she was just on a blank soundstage with nothing but blue and green all around her. So
yeah, like
well, they had to use green because she was blue.
Okay, but like it had a lot of great moments to it, and I understand that in theory it was a big deal. It just seemed like it was only special because in theory it was supposed to be a big deal.
Yeah.
That being said, I watched the fuck out of these special features so much. Had a lot of fun rewatching that. Like, I think that feature-long documentary on it, and a lot of great memories. But at the end of the day, very mediocre story. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, at least this one was good." I'm like, yeah, but it wasn't good. It was just better than the other two, in my opinion. There were far too many problems with it, and there's just such a such a stiff, inconsistent feeling between this and the original trilogy. And I think obviously you could say that with the prequel trilogy altogether. It just doesn't feel like the same franchise other than by name. And yeah, this is just an extension of that. It became very clear at this point that George Lucas became very interested in pursuing different types of storytelling that had nothing to do with the archetypal nature of the original trilogy. And yeah, I think the only reason a lot of people like this was because it was a culmination. And that's it.
And you get to see him in the suit, and then he says that horrible nerd.
Oh my god, it was so bad, and it looked goofy. Like if you look at it now, it's like awkwardly CG in a way, and yeah, it was not disheartening when I first saw it, but the more I watch it now, and I've watched it a lot, it's the movie I've watched the most in the prequel trilogy. It just doesn't hold up. And like the other two, I think this is a problem for all of the prequel trilogy movies. They almost feel like they are two separate movies a piece, and that they just go on for too long, and I get bored by about halfway through every single time of every single movie. And they don't feel very cohesive.
No, not at all. And I'll be one to say and admit that when I was younger, I thought the graphics looked great. But if you've seen the Blu-ray versions of the prequel trilogies, any of them, the CGI stands out so bad. It takes you out of the movie. I mean, when the only real thing on screen is Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's the only real thing on screen, it becomes so obvious. And it really, the bad CGI can pull me out of a movie just like that. I'm out. I can't focus on what's going on. I'm more like, well, that looks fake, and they reuse that shot from something else, and why couldn't they do this practically? I start thinking about all the things that's wrong with what's on screen versus the story or the acting.
It's funny, bad CG doesn't bother me that
Really?
much. It has to be really bad in order to bother me. Yeah, I really don't care. As long as it's good enough to get a point across, it could look bad. I really don't mind. But I know I'm one of the few people to think that way. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate one thing that George Lucas did with the Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and that's he really pioneered digital filmmaking and like legit digital cameras.
Yes.
Those two movies were shot with digital cameras. They don't hold up. You know, The Phantom Menace I think is the best looking movie, like as far as like the way it looks overall. But it did help push things forward and bring more people over to digital. Robert Rodriguez, David Fincher, Michael Mann, a bunch of other really big filmmakers. And I appreciate that impact on filmmaking. I almost feel like that's the main positive that came out of this, was the advent of digital filmmaking. I'm not sure, would it have happened otherwise? Maybe, probably, but it happened much quicker because you had someone big like George Lucas backing it.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, George Lucas has, even going back to the OT, they talk about how he pioneered certain aspects of filmmaking. In the OT, it was like special effects. You know, he really worked hard on his special effects and using practical effects in a way that other people hadn't. You know, like they talk about making the Death Star scene, and he's cobbling together all of these battleship models and stuff like that to put together his Death Star for film. And so, yeah, I can definitely agree with you. Lucas is definitely a person with a good amount of ingenuity in his brain and willing to take risks, but they don't always pay off.
Yeah.
So that's your number 8. My number 8 is Attack of the Clones. Everything that you said about it, the love story just being horrible. I liked, again, when I was younger, all of these lightsaber battles felt really cool until I get older and I realize they're just dancing. They're dancing with swords. You know, you stopped having them fight and they're dancing with swords. And I don't like that at all. The whole clones being a clone of Jango Fett, Boba's, you know, clone / dad. I hated that story aspect. I hated it when they announced it, you know. They show this guy, he's a Mandalorian with the armor, looks just like Boba's, and then we learn that he's got an unaltered clone to raise as his son. Look, me and you've had this discussion before. I don't care about Boba Fett, the character itself. He looked cool. That's it. I have no interest in any further stories about him. He's got some stuff in the EU that was kind of cool. There's a line in a book, I've mentioned it to you before. He kind of sort of saves Han Solo inadvertently. And Han and Boba look at each other, and Boba tells him, look, dude, it was just, you were just a job. And I like that they didn't delve too much in. They didn't make him more important than what he was. He was a bounty hunter. And so when Lucas did this with episode 2, I didn't like it. Clone Wars, like you said, you kind of showed us when you first hear the Clone Wars in A New Hope, you're thinking, man, the clones must have been the bad guys. And now we're learning that they're the good guys. Like I said, it's a good twist. Just overall, the execution of the movie was poor. I do see some fun stuff. I enjoy the arena battle. I think that's a lot of fun, and I think that's why I would be more likely to watch Attack of the Clones instead of The Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace, I'll just watch that one lightsaber battle on YouTube. you know, Attack of the Clones, there are some fun things in there. There's some of the space battles. I can't remember which game it was, but there's a game. Maybe it was on Nintendo 64. Maybe it was the Rogue Squadron game. Actually, I think that might have been it. And you can play through some of the story elements from the prequels, and you get that Jedi Starfighter, which kind of looks like an arrowhead. And there's the scene where Jango's chasing him, and he's got the bombs that blow up, and it's got like a shockwave in the asteroid field. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. I can remember using that weapon set in a Star Wars game and really, really enjoying like the tactical advantage of these concussive bombs that the ship used. And so, yeah, those are my memories for episode 2, a video game and the cool battle arena scene. I did not like, being an EU fan, I did not like how the Geonosians had the plans for the Death Star. That was a weird way to try to pay off something in A New Hope that they just completely ignored when they brought about Rogue One, which I'm kind of glad. Yeah. Yeah. So that's my number 8, Attack of the Clones. So let's get into your number 7.
My number 7, I'm wondering if this is going to be controversial. Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi is thematically sound in that it follows Luke trying to redeem his father rather than kill him, and that it ultimately succeeds in that. I like the idea of all the stuff. I guess this is the first time George Lucas-isms start coming in for me. I like the idea of all the stuff. Like the idea of them going to disable the shield on the moon of Endor, then them fighting this battle over here. I like the opening. All that stuff is cool. But after watching it a million times, I couldn't help just how boring it was for a lot of it. It feels like a lot of nothing was happening. And especially that last act where I feel like the emotion should be really resonant. It was a lot of standing around and a lot of just talking. Also, Han Solo was not really Han Solo. Obviously, he was... I don't think he was not Han Solo. I just think he was no longer the character that I liked because he was basically fully reformed at that point.
Yeah.
And he was less interesting and more just grumpy in a way that was like, oh, my dad is grumpy.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that. And I didn't mind the Ewok stuff, believe it or not. But ultimately, it just didn't feel like it had a lot of impact on me. Even though I rewatched it many times, it felt like the most pedestrian of the original trilogy. Like they were just kind of churning it out to finish off the story. Anything else? I feel like their plan at Jabba's palace made no sense. If you start pulling the threads of what happened and why they do stuff, it's like, why is she going undercover as this, and he going undercover as this, and the droid's undercover as this,
and Lando's already there,
and Lando's already there. It just didn't feel. I feel like it just could have gone differently. I can't pinpoint why, but it just felt false. It felt like there's so many opportunities for them to handle things much differently than they ended up being.
Yeah, there's some stuff that's explained in Shadows of the Empire. That kind of fills in some of those gaps. The book, not the game, that kind of fills in some of those gaps. If you're going to check out a short EU book, to try that one. It's not too bad.
It's not that short. It's like 400 pages.
Okay, well, I mean...
I was just saying, I was like, you say it's short, you make it sound like it's a 150-page novelette. But no, it's like an actual book.
I guess. I can read, 500 and 600 page novels with no problem. I'm bragging. I don't mean to, but yeah, I think anything like in the 400 and shorter range, I consider those to be shorter. My bad. I'm sorry. It's not a Goosebumps novel. It's not 150 pages like you said. All right. Got it. But it is a quick read. It's a fun read. It's got some Black Sun stuff in there, and it does fill in some of those gaps between Empire and Jedi.
What was the name of the bad guy in that again?
Prince Shizor.
Was that it? I thought I just sworn it was someone else.
No, Prince Shizor. He's
Shizor?
Yeah, he's the head of Black Sun. Reptilian. He's got black hair and a ponytail in the back.
Yeah, the ponytail guy. That's his name? God, I don't remember. I read that in 3rd grade. I remember reading it in 3rd grade and loving it, but that's about it.
Yeah. Me, actually really like Return of the Jedi. Like you say, thematically, the whole saving of Darth Vader, the scene in the hallway after Luke turns himself in, I think is just one of the greatest scenes ever. And I think that...
Which scene?
In the hallway after Luke turns himself in and the soldiers bring Luke to Vader. And Vader takes his lightsaber. He's like, I see you've constructed your own lightsaber, yada, yada, yada. Some of the lines in there when Luke... when Vader... You can almost hear hurt in Vader's eyes. And it's really cool when you go back and watch Jedi and Empire and Jedi, and look at David Prowse in the suit and his ability to really convey body language. You can't see a face, but little things about the way he tenses up, leaning forward or leaning back, slumping a little bit. I mean, Darth Vader's nobody you ever imagine just kind of like chilling on a rail. But there's that scene in that hallway where he's having this conversation with Luke, and he's basically telling Luke, look, there is no saving me. And he kind of leans against the rail. It conveys emotions that usually you need facial expressions to convey. And I really appreciate that. I think Return of the Jedi is probably the most underrated of the original trilogy. And it gets a bad rap because of the Ewoks. You said you didn't mind them. There's times I don't mind them. There's times where it's really annoying. My son, of course, he's almost 5. He likes Ewoks, which is great. And I think there was a way they could have used them without it being as corny as it ended up being.
I don't even think it's that corny, to be honest. I think people just don't like... People like, oh, it's sci-fi and edgy, therefore it can't have anything that's cute.
Yeah.
I think it's stupid. People need to get over themselves.
Yeah, I can see that. But I kind of am like, all right, it's a little bit too much here.
There was one point that really drove home to me, like, oh, this is a serious story. It was when that one Ewok, his paraglider was shot, and he fell down and died, and then his friend tries to shake him awake, and he's dead. Yeah. And it's like, okay, there are consequences here. Even though these things are cute and cuddly, there are consequences. And
I did like that. I definitely appreciated that. So I definitely have Return of the Jedi a lot higher up on my list. So we'll continue discussing it once we get there. Any last comments from your side on it?
Thematically, great. It just didn't feel like there was much of a director thumbprint on it. It just felt like they needed someone to drive it into the finish line.
Yeah. Well, then let's get into my number 7, which would be Revenge of the Sith. Like you said, it's ultimate culmination. I can remember when the trailer first hit and you hear the Emperor say Lord Vader, and he says, "Yes, Master." And they say, "Rise." And you got this really great scene with the bed coming up, and there's Vader, and you're like, "Oh, yes, we're going to finally get to see Darth Vader as the evil son of a bitch that he is. And why he's so evil. We've seen him go a little bit dark, a little bit at a time, and he's kind of a pissy ass, whiny boy, and and he's finally going to become that guy that we see in A New Hope, force choking the hell out of somebody. And no, we didn't quite get that. We got some interesting dark moments, Master Skywalker. What are we supposed to do? And he turns on his lightsaber, and he's just slaughtering children left and right.
That kid couldn't even act. Just his delivery was weird.
No, it was bad. It was bad. He must have been somebody on the crew or somebody involved in the movies, like kid, who they're like, "Please, George, just put him in, please." But yeah, it was so, like you said, long and so many things trying to connect. I hated the evolution of the starships, the fighter ships, the Jedi. There's one that kind of looks like a TIE fighter, one that looks like an A-wing, and then they have those ARC fighters. I think they're called ARC fighters, which are precursors to the X-wing, and the troop carriers look like star destroyers. And like I said, just George Lucas trying to bridge these two parts of the saga together. Didn't care for it. I hated the Emperor's makeup. For some reason, when
it was like fat and froggy.
Yeah, when I look at it, his neck, it looks like the latex mask didn't get set down all the way. Like, why couldn't you just go with the makeup? I mean, it's the same actor from the OT. Why not just copy what you did in the original trilogy?
I get why, because he's much older and more decrepit in the other one. So and there's like 20 years for there to evolve. He doesn't need to look exactly the same because there's a 20-year gap.
Yeah, but that much vastly different. It almost looks like, and this might be a bit of a stretch for some people, but do you remember the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror where they're making fun of Bram Stoker's Dracula and Mr. Burns as Dracula?
Mm-mm. I don't remember that, no.
Go look up a picture one of these days and look at like the way the makeup is done or the drawing is done of Mr. Burns as that vampire and the ridges. And for some reason that always clicks in my brain. It's not an exact copy, but that always clicks in my brain with him. The Emperor, to me, reminds me of Dracula, Mr. Burns for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
You kind of see it?
I can kind of see it, yeah.
Yeah. And and like I said, that neck part where it looks like the latex mask was like too long, and instead of cutting it and smoothing it down, they just kind of like shoved it in there and like, yeah, just roll with it. But yeah, that's Revenge of the Sith. The dancing lightsaber battle, yeah, it looked fun in theaters. But like I said, it's more of a dance than it is a fight. And there's too many times where it's just literally blue and blue flashing in front of the screen. Like, you're just looking at two dudes' faces as this blue and blue flashes right in front of the screen again and again. And it's nowhere near as cool today as it was back then. One of the cool things about the prequels, since I'm closing these out now, is I did get to see all three of them in theaters with my dad, which was really great. I'm happy that I'm able to build some Star Wars memories with my own son. And I know that Star Wars is a generational thing. It's not always father, son, or parent and child. It could be older family friends or uncles, grandparents, whatever. But it is a multi-generational thing where me and you were both roughly the same age. I've got a kid of my own. There's other kids in his school that have Star Wars book bags. There's older people on our staff that are huge Star Wars fans. It's very, very cool. And so I'm very thankful for those memories that I got with that. So, hey, thanks, Dad. Anything else? Anything else to say on Revenge of the Sith?
Just as in regards to the lightsabers fights, I just remember that one shot where they're like swinging the lightsabers like around their backs and and then like it's like they're swinging batons and then they clashed at the end. It was just
just over the top.
Yeah.
Alrighty then. So let's go into number 7. We've closed out the prequels, right? You did all.
We've
three
closed
of them?
out the prequels. They're all gone.
Done. All right. So let's get into number 6. All that's left now is the OT, the NT, and Solo and Rogue One. Somewhere in there.
All right. So number 6, right? 6.
Yep.
Yes. We have Solo: A Star Wars Story. Like you, I had problems with it, but not the same kind of problems. My problems, I think I'd mentioned already, had to do with the fact that this movie just didn't justify itself. I remember thinking like, oh, you're finally gonna get your chance to see Solo as a young scoundrel. It's like, all right, I didn't ask for that, but sure, go ahead and have him be a scoundrel for me. It just didn't justify itself. Like, there was no reason I needed to know why he got the Millennium Falcon, how he got the dice, how he met Lando, how he met how he met Lando. Chewie. That's it.
There you go.
How he met, how he did anything, how he did the Kessel Run. I didn't need that list of things to go down, and that's exactly what they gave me. It literally was exactly what I feared a Solo Star Wars story would be. It exactly was that. Yes, it was fun, but it didn't give me anything new. Didn't expand the universe. Didn't make me care.
No.
The filmmaking was nice. It looked good. It was a bit dark visually, which I think was kind of annoying. And I almost feel like it was like Ron Howard being like, oh, let's shoot it this way. And then them doing it and being like, this is how it turns out, right? We can lighten it up in post, right? And they're like, oh, no, we can't. He's like, oh, fuck. Okay, I guess we'll just go with this then. Like, they didn't realize they needed to light it a bit lighter or something. Yeah. Something about it. But yeah, it just we didn't need this movie. We did not need this movie. And it was fun, but didn't need it. Especially this was the last movie we needed if it was the one that we got 5 months after the previous one.
Yeah, definitely. I think the releasing it so close, instead of, first off, I think pushing it to December, even though it was already a very expensive movie, I think pushing it to December would have been smarter. Yeah. You still had the divisiveness of The Last Jedi going on fresh in everybody's mind, and you're going to jump into a movie that everybody was tracking the production issues it had. And so you already had people that are thinking, well, this movie's gone through a couple of directors, well, 2 working together, and then Ron Howard. We know that there's been tons of reshoots and this, that, and the other. And so people already have this idea in the back of their mind that this movie's damaged. Is that a good word? And I do. I think that hurt. I think if they had pushed it to December, I think it may have actually even done better.
I think this movie was also better than it needed to be. It's competent. It's more than competent. It's enjoyable. It just, especially considering what had happened to it, the fact that they were able to make it this good is really awesome.
Yeah.
And I think once it's more further back in our rearview mirror, maybe about 10 years, maybe we'll find that it's more beloved than it is now. But as it stands, it's just a forgettable entry. It's kind of an Indiana Jones story, for better or worse. But yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about it. I watched it the other day. I think it had a similar problem as to the prequels in that it felt too long. And I also think Alden Ehrenreich did a pretty good job. He did as good of a job as he could have done. Was not a fan of Donald Glover's Lando Calrissian. It felt like it was put on too much. It seemed like there was a lot of natural charisma that came out of Billy D. Williams, and that he was overcompensating for it in this movie and sort of putting up a front. That being said, I could see your argument saying that that's exactly what Lando would have done at that younger age. Sure. But yeah, it just felt like a guy dressing up in his dad's clothes and pretending to be his dad.
I can kind of see that. I will say I don't think anybody else could have done any better.
Yeah.
As Lando
with that script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what we were going to get no matter who was in, and Glover's a fun actor. I even enjoy, it's a very small bit in Spider-Man Homecoming, but absolutely love that bit. His presence on screen, he's got one. And he did Community, and he's done a couple other things like it.
Derek Comedy.
Yeah, and is it called ATL or is it called Atlanta? I can't remember.
Atlanta.
Okay, yeah, he's
The
done
FX
that.
show.
Yeah, the guy's got chops, man. He's got acting chops, and I'm interested to see him do some more big screen stuff. I really am. But yeah, it's like I said, if you had taken it different characters, same story, different characters, I would have been a lot happier with it than I was as a solo movie. And one thing I forgot to mention when I had it way back down at number 9, Nick, yes, 9 out of 10. Why did they have Han Solo growl Wookiee in this fucking movie?
Here's the thing.
Oh,
I'm okay with that.
No.
Like, it's silly, it's stupid, but it's fine because
it's so horrible.
no, how else are these people going to communicate with each other? It's not always possible. Like, they have to approximate. People speak each other's languages. That's a thing. Just because a guy has a terrible American accent when he's speaking Chinese, at least he's speaking Chinese.
Yeah. I was gonna say that my counter to that is the idea that you've got some languages in Star Wars that have enunciation. They have words, and I can buy a human learning Rhodian or a human learning Huttese more than I can buy a human learning Wookiee. That's like me trying to learn how to speak dog or cat. I mean, just no, I don't buy it. I didn't buy it at all.
Okay, that's
But
fair. Yeah. I mean, I guess the good comparable here is what was it? Thor talking about learning Groot language as an elective.
Yeah.
But I mean, the difference also is Star Wars is like has a more cohesive canon than Marvel does. Yeah, I could see why, but at the same time, these people have to communicate somehow. These characters have to communicate somehow, like in the history of them. And I could see him approximating certain things with his growls, but I don't know. Who knows?
I remember
it did feel like something that was pulled because everyone makes fun of Chewbacca with that noise, and it almost felt like it was making fun of that, or like just being like, "Hey kids, this is how it is." So I can understand your problem with it.
Yeah.
If you look back at it a little bit more objectively, I almost feel like it kind of makes sense, even if it's laughable.
Okay.
But that's I could see your
it.
point. I could see your point, but I just feel like maybe it's not as bad. Who knows? But it did pull me out as well.
Yeah. So that covers Solo. Solo's gone now. Yay!
Bye, Solo.
So, Joseph, here we go. This
All right.
this is number 6, The Last Jedi.
Oh boy, I didn't want to get here already. God damn it. Oh, okay. The Last Jedi. Go for it.
The Last Jedi is my number 6. Okay.
Okay.
Look. Me and you've had this discussion, and God, our staff has had this discussion on Slack. We've got an entire channel dedicated to Star Wars, which started because of conversations about The Last Jedi. There are some amazing things in The Last Jedi. Cinematically, it's one of the most beautiful science fiction, space, science fantasy movies ever, and definitely one of the most beautiful looking Star Wars films. It's glorious. All except Canto Bite visually. Canto Bite's CGI really pulled me out of it. But everything else
Is it
just
Canto
looks
Bite?
so great.
Is it Canto Bite or is it just the chase scene?
So when they're in the casino with all that practical stuff, it's fine. That chase scene is atrocious. And then some of the stuff in the stables where you can tell they're doing blue and green screens. Okay. There's no real sky. There's some stuff in the background that's bad. But yeah, the horse creatures atrocious.
But the horse creatures were practical. A lot of it was practical.
But they're in the chase scene. A lot of it's not. Yeah,
that's true.
And that pulls me out of it. And it is what it is. But again, there's so many beautiful moments in there. And here we go. I like Luke Skywalker's arc. Yes, more hate. Send it to me. It's all good. This is an EU Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker went in exile. Luke Skywalker does have insane force abilities to shut himself off to where he can't be detected. He's got insane and this is in the EU and in the movie, of course. He's got the ability to fight through force projection. I think this is a great Luke Skywalker. I know people will point out that Mark Hamill disagrees. I know people will point out that they disagree. I liked it. I feel like in the universe that they are creating with this new trilogy, that is where Luke Skywalker would be. He felt like a failure, and Luke always was really emotional. Even in the OT, he was a very emotional person. and he would take some things way too serious. And so I can see him having this big failure and just kind of being like, nah, screw it, I'm done. I'm going into hiding. I'm too powerful. I'm making things happen that I don't want to see happen. I'm done. Rey. I like Rey. She's fine with me. Her arc in this is fine. And then Finn and Poe and Rose. First off, Finn and Poe. I think the problem is they were never supposed to continue to exist together. Poe was originally supposed to be killed off in The Force Awakens. And I think when JJ decided to keep him on, and Poe's a fine character, don't get me wrong overall, but I think once they decided to keep him on, it kind of added to the problem that Disney already has with no plan for these 3 movies. Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I disagree, but
Okay.
I'll let you continue.
So I think some of the issues there with what they were going to do with those 2 or 3 when you add in Rose is part of that problem. Look, tactically, Holdo as a commander not divulging her plan is garbage. I have my own opinion on why I think the writer, director, producers did that. But regardless of why they did it, that would never happen in a military situation. Subordinate commanders that are part of planning advise and assist superior commanders. That's just the way it is. Why they could have withheld some of it from the audience, they shouldn't have had her withhold it from Poe, because it appears that he's in charge of the starfighters, the X-Wing squadrons.
I disagree slightly. I think, really quick, sorry to interrupt, but
No,
I think I think it would have been easier if they had just had him thrown into holding, because to me, she made it clear he did not follow orders, he did not respect human life, and he could not be trusted, hence why she didn't tell him. But he should have been thrown into holding, and that would not have changed a whole lot. You could have easily had the other character let him out, and then he could have continued planning.
That could have been better, yes.
Yeah,
but
so I don't think she should have told him. I just think he should not have been into the plan, and then they should have figured it out afterwards. So that's where I stand.
But because they didn't lock him up and they kept him in charge of what he was in charge of, she should have told him. But you're right.
Yeah.
If they had locked him up, if Leia had said, look, you're done. You just cost us our bombers. You just cost us, 20-some-odd lives.
When she came on.
Yeah,
she said,
you're going to jail.
Boom.
Yeah, that I could have bought. That would have been forgivable. But that's not the way it went down, so that's why I have an issue with it. And God, how great is that throne room scene? So beautiful. Like I said,
love it.
Cinematically, it's gorgeous. And I don't have an issue with Rey being from nobody. I never wanted her to be a Palpatine, a Kenobi, or a Skywalker. I really, really didn't.
What about an Urso?
I really don't care one way or the other. I like the less important her lineage, the better it is for her. Because let's all remember, at one point, Anakin Skywalker was just... he just had a mom. He was a slave child. Yeah, he was born of the Force, but there's been other great Jedi. Kenobi, we don't know anything about Kenobi's family or how great his bloodline is or how great Qui-Gon Jinn's bloodline is or any of that. None of that matters. The Force has the ability to be way more powerful in one person than it is another person. That's established in the OT, that's established in the prequel trilogies. Why can't she be that powerful? I have no issues with that. And Snoke. Having Snoke being nobody special, I think it would have been cool to have something to touch back in the past with Snoke. But I think getting him out of the way is great to bring Kylo Ren to the forefront.
Yeah, I feel like that amplified Kylo Ren so much more as a terrifying villain. I love so much. I want to save a lot of this discussion for me on my end when I get to it later on. But I'm trying to think anything directly you want me to address up front in regards to what you said, so we don't forget.
Do you have any counterpoints besides the Holdo thing?
Counterpoints, Poe and Finn. Because you mentioned that they didn't have a plan, which is obvious by this point, I don't think there was a point where they were like, oh shit, he was supposed to die. He was supposed to have this happen to him. What are we going to do now? They didn't have that thing. It was just like, here's where the characters are, go. So I don't think it was about them like not knowing what to do at all. I really think they had really great arcs, especially Finn. I could see the complaints with Canto Bight, but my thing with Finn is that I think a lot of people, they had a problem with Finn because they assumed that he was already a part of the rebellion, where in my mind, he was always on Team Finn and not Team Resistance, because he was friends with Ray. It was
Yeah.
all about Ray. It was all about him. And they were like, wait, isn't this a step back from where he was? But it really wasn't. This was him actually becoming a resistance guy, saying like rebel scum at that one point. That was the completion of his arc. As cheesy as it was, everything that came before it was exactly perfectly on point thematically, which I'll get to more. So I think his arc was really good. Poe's arc, I think, needed to be addressed as well because he was like a hotshot pilot, and they had this potential idea of having, he's a hell of a pilot. He's a nice guy. He's best friends with Finn, and, you know, they're able to do this stuff. Like, there's almost nowhere for him to go. So they basically addressed his potential shortcoming, and that had to do with him being too much in hands-on and being too much gung-ho, and about addressing that very real aspect that's never been addressed in these movies before. And I think that really worked on the whole, like having him realize the importance of the resistance on the whole and winning the war and not the battle.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been better if he had been locked into holding, and that's my number one complaint with it. But yeah, I do want to talk more about Finn and Rose, but that's later on.
Yep.
Other situations, I think this is one of my favorite movies. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's one of my favorites in the whole franchise, so we'll get to that more.
Thank you so much for watching part 1 of LRM Ranks Star Wars. Look for part 2 tomorrow, but in the meantime, feel free to check out some of our other videos in the links provided. Also, be sure to go to lrmonline.com to check out all of our amazing content there.